You must understand where you've been in order to create the path forward to where you want to go. And today we have the founder of TopCyberPro.com, Jim West, to discuss the year in review and where we will be going in the next year with Top Cyber Pro. Welcome to the show, Jim West. Jim, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Terry. How are you doing?
Dude, every day is Monday. I swear to
Can we
God.
see
Like
that
it's
shirt? Every day is Monday.
Every day is Monday, I'm telling you. And in the cyber world, if one small thing happens or one thing goes wrong, it can feel like a Monday. You're putting out fires all day long and this, that, and the other. But I love it, man. Look, here's the thing, and it's been a while since we've connected, here on a podcast. So number one, I just want to first and foremost thank you so much for taking the reins in season two and being a great host for Top Cyber Pro podcast, but you've had some truly amazing guests as well too. And I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, say thank you for that as well. And man, you've had some truly phenomenal episodes on season two. But
Mhm.
before we go into that, let's talk about your books because you've been on a publishing rampage here lately,
Mhm.
and you have three books that you just recently published: CISP
Yeah.
in 10 days.
I got CISP in 10 days, CISP in 30 days. Pretty much the goal is to get you through the CISP exam. And the way I usually tell people, it's not a like all-in-one or 11th hour book. Those books, if you need to study the terms and the content of the exam, get those books. Go to whatever YouTube, I call it YouTube University, watch whoever's videos, read whoever's websites, and ingest the content. What this is a study overlay. If you ever needed like a teacher or a mentor to say, hey, this is the strategy and approach to pass this exam. And what it does is I'll just kind of flip through some pages. It tells you about the exam, but what it does is it breaks down the strategy as into identifying your weaknesses. And so it will challenge you to go take an assessment somewhere and to know what your bottom three domains are. And the real simple thing that I'll offer for free right now for anyone watching is take your bottom three domains and then the next 10 days, or if you're doing 30 days, make those three bottom domains your strengths. And this book will give you the tips and tactics of how to make those domains your strengths. And then on
Mm.
top of it, as a value add, it's got my best-selling cybersecurity test tips and methods that will help you pass not just the CISP, but many other cybersecurity certifications. And it also has, I think, active learning is in here. Let me just take a second to flip to it. But yeah, I believe, active learning is in here, which also change how you take in information. So you're not just simply, writing it on the chalkboard 100 times, hoping to memorize it that way. That's a rote memory. It's the worst kind of memory. It will show you ways that you can basically hack your own memory so that you can retain information for longer. So what you do read and the time and energy you put into studying, watching videos and content, you're able to recall it later for the test when it really matters. So yeah.
I love that. And understanding the type of learner that you are is really critical because I always tell everybody, look, different people learn different things differently. And what I love about your book there in active learning is that you've really highlighted some of those different ways that people learn differently. And once you understand the type of a learner you are, you can really start to take a look at those different things in new ways that you never thought possible and open up not only the opportunities, but the possibilities of where you can take your learning.
Yes, I mean, I come across a lot of people where obviously the number one sensory of learning is through visual, right? That's why YouTube, as I call it, YouTube University, is so popular. That's why social media, TikTok, Vine, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Shorts, all this content is visual, right? We watch TVs, we watch movies, we watch, all these shows and short form content because majority of the planet is visual learners. But there are percentages of people that have an edge when it comes to being an oral, someone that can hear something and recall it better, or someone that learns through sensory and touch, having to do it before they have to get their hands on their tactile type learners. And so once those few groups, like we're talking like 7% of the population, 5% of the population, it's still a significant number of people that if they never knew that, and majority of us are visual learners, so that when they're trying to be in a room where people say, "Hey, just watch this YouTube video," they're like, it's not clicking, it's not working for me, I can't
Mhm.
remember it later, then that's where it really shines a light on those other types of learning and how to change up. So some people just, have to go to like audiobooks, for example. And then for your oral listeners, audiobooks are like a godsend. So again, just knowing the type of learner you are and really honing in on that makes a world of difference, especially when it comes to memory retention.
I love that, and the cybersecurity world, whether it's in your own mind or whether it's out there virtually, it can be quite a battlefield. And you just wrote and published a new book called The Art of War in Cybersecurity. Let's shift over into that one right there because look, at the end of the day, cybersecurity is not going away. Cyber threats are not going away, and it's oftentimes a battlefield. So, how do you combat cybersecurity? How do you combat those threats, and how did you present that within your book?
So back in about 2016, 2017, I first, I've read Art of War by Sun Tzu back when I was in my early 20s, and it was a very eye-opening book. And there's so many stories that are attributed to his work of just strategy, and sometimes you read some of these things, and it's like that old saying, common sense isn't always so common, but you're reading this very straightforward tactics from a master technician back then as a Chinese general, and you're looking at it like, wait a minute, this stuff is pretty good and has stood the test of thousands of years. It's still applicable today. So back then, I was at a conference where I got asked to speak and present a strategy focused topic. And so I decided to do one called The Art of War in Cybersecurity, where I took snippets of the art of war and I, did my correlation to current cybersecurity threats and landscapes, and I presented that. And when I got done with that presentation, I had so many officers and people that were coming up to me saying, Jim, is this going to be a book? And I said, yes. Actually, as soon as I walked off the stage, I was like, I got to write this book. But life
Mm.
happens, and it just so many other books came ahead of it and before it. And so just this past summer of 2024, I said, I want to revisit this. I want to complete the draft. And so that's what I did. I spent some time working on it. I finished the draft, and lo and behold, it exists. And it's a beautiful cover. This is the traditional edition of the Art of War and Cybersecurity. And I have a cybernetic edition that's also available on Amazon. It's a little bit bigger format, but it has extra content as well. But I wanted to provide this because in the industry, a lot of folks are looking for that senior level guidance, that multi-domain expert guidance, because a lot of folks they'll be an expert in one field, but they know that they have a lot of gaps into their knowledge. And other folks that are in networking or in pen testing or in auditing and or risk management, there are all these different facets now. I mean, our career, the industry has grown and been refined to create so many different positions. But a lot of times, these people, when they reach a certain level, they lose that perspective and strategy. And so, by providing this book to industry, it's kind of, is my offering back to industry to say, hey, this knowledge from thousands of years ago is still just as relevant as it was then. It's relevant today. So I'm really proud and happy about this work.
Yeah, I love it. Congratulations on the release of both of those books, by the way. And, it's been said that, well, I didn't write the book really wrote me. How did writing these books right here shift your thinking on the way that you approach cybersecurity? How did that really kind of change your mindset, your action set, and the way that you look at the industry?
Well, what's interesting is that at my point in my career, I'm almost 50, and I've been working now 32 plus years. And what it did was when I was working on the draft this summer, it really just affirmed the perspectives that I've had, like Beyond the CIA Triad, which is one of my papers I wrote, security papers that I present on. Almost every year, I have a conference or event that's asking for this presentation, having that nine principle perspective of security, which is head and shoulders beyond what I would say 90% of experts in industry do not have this nine security control perspective that I do. And so, when I'm reading The Art of War, I'm seeing exactly how it's fitting in and into that perspective. And, again, you hear that term defense in depth. It just validates a lot of the things that I have, whether through stumbling across it in my career or from lessons learned in my career, or just as I gain more knowledge. I still take certifications, right? And so between 400 to 500 continuing education credit hours of training that I do a year to every year, I usually pick up, a couple certifications. Like this year, I think I've already picked up like 7, 8 certifications. So I'm constantly a perpetual student. And as a perpetual student, I'm constantly growing my knowledge base or at least reaffirming knowledge that I already have learned in my career. So yeah, the creation of the work did a lot of affirmation is the best way I
Yeah.
would say that.
I love that, and when it comes down to knowledge, skills, and experience, really, there's a lot of it out there. And I know over the last year, you've interviewed some tremendous guests on the Top Cyber Pro podcast right here. And man, I know next year we're going to have, we've already got in store next year with some really great guests as well, too. But over the last year, who was the best like person you interviewed, or what was your biggest takeaway? Because once again, we had a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, a lot of experience shared in season two. What was your biggest takeaway?
There's been, again, I have to start first by saying thanks to all of my guests. Without you, there's no podcast. So, these people are level 99 professionals that are taking time out of their busy, day jobs to just give an hour to offer insights and perspectives on the expertise that they have, the experience, and just insights into being the role that they serve in industry. And so I have to thank all of my guests from the podcast. But if I had to say one big takeaway, I always think that a lot of them, we came to the same conclusion about, because, Top Cyber Pro, the site exists to help people get into cybersecurity. I mean, our mission statement is, closing the skills gap in cybersecurity. And so we want everyone to jump into the pool. We want everyone to whatever industry you're in. You could be an educator, you could be in the medical field, you could be in financial banking. It doesn't matter what field you're in. Cyber is ready for you. And whatever you're interested in the cyber, there is a job for it. Whether you want to be auditor, pen tester, a management person, risk person, there's so many different roles and jobs waiting for you. So I think the most common thing when we spoke about like cyber education or cyber skills training and so forth, the most common thing was, hey, pick a direction. Any direction and at any point, what's beautiful about cyber, you could be going this direction. Let's say you start with like try hack me or hack the box and you're studying hacking. And at any point along that path, you're like, this isn't for me. I kind of want to be more, interfacing with people. Well, hey, risk management, governance, risk and compliance. You can just easily lateral over here. And that's what's beautiful about cyber. You could be in one path and decide this isn't my forte, and you can easily sidestep over to another path or over here to another path. And that's what cyber is. That's why I love the cyber industry is because there's so many pathways in, and there's so many pathways to move up within cyber. And that's something I
Yeah,
think we saw time and time again with a lot of the episodes. But Terry,
yeah,
if I had to say if there was one episode that still sticks with me today, especially with the recent events in the Middle East and so forth, is the very first episode with Irfan. So in that first episode, season two, episode one, I had this, former, well, he's an Iranian hacker that has left Iran, and he shared his story, which I had no clue of where this interview was going to go because I actually reached out to him because of a wonderful digital forensics toolkit called CSI Linux. Well, we'll put the
mhm,
link in the description, but it's if you think of Kali Linux, for those of you who have heard of Kali Linux, think of that as like the Batman tool belt of hacking tools as a hacking suite. But then for digital forensics, you have CSI Linux. So it's almost like the Kali Linux. Kali is for offensive, and then you have like defensive, doing incident handling with the CSI. So I reached
yeah,
out to him because he was one of the senior members of the team that developed it. And so the goal of the podcast was to talk about the CSI Linux toolkit. But it ended up once he started sharing his story, it captivated me. I mean, I was blown away because being someone that was in Iran, and if you watch that episode, I implore anyone that's got to this point, go ahead and pause this video right now. Do yourself a favor and load up Irfan's episode because he shares his story. And the big statement that he made that completely just really hit my heart was that, people think of VPNs like during COVID, people was usually have to work virtually or remotely from their office. That
mhm,
VPNs was just a common thing for Americans and everybody else in the world, but he had to build his own VPNs. It wasn't that he bought a VPN service. They had to code and develop their VPNs from scratch to survive. And when he said, I needed to learn cyber to survive, that just immediately struck something in me saying, wow, for a lot of us, we're just trying to protect an organization's data, protect the customers, protect the services, keep the data flowing and the links up securely. And here's an individual that his early start into cyber was to survive, to stay ahead of government surveillance, to stay ahead of being tracked, to stay ahead of being eventually caught and murdered. And that really struck home that he had to learn cyber to survive. And that is a powerful, powerful episode,
yeah.
episode one of season two. So please, if you're watching this, pause, immediately watch that episode. It really strikes home. And given today's current climate in in the region in the Middle East, it's more relevant now than ever. So
Yeah.
that definitely stood.
And that rings true with the art of cybersecurity or art of war and cybersecurity, because the battlefield oftentimes is not, how we think of it with bombs and bullets. The new warfare is cyber is, it's out there in the cyber world, so to speak. So the art of war in cybersecurity is relevant for anybody because look, it's a battlefield on the internet that's out there, whether it's on social media, whether it's businesses, organizations, or just the average person sitting in their home. I could share stories of people that I know that's been hacked and has had money taken them from these experts that are out there saying that they're certified in this, that, and the other. It's a battlefield that's out there. And I don't think that it's a battlefield that's going away anytime soon. But look, we always talk about the gaps. And I think that really one of the biggest gaps is training. But what is one of the biggest opportunities in cybersecurity right now?
I mean, I think really just shift in perspective. I
Hmm.
say it time and time again, defense in depth means more than what people think it means. Yes, there's layered security and so forth, but they need to understand the nine security principles that are at play when you're planning your defense in depth strategy. Because again, just because you have two different systems, they might be trying to focus on the same control. And so therefore, you end up putting your eggs in a lot of one basket of nine security controls. And when it comes to like when you hear about the data breaches, we hear about one almost every day now, and of this bank or this organization or the release of these customer records from this business or that. We hear about it almost on a daily basis at this point. And what people don't
Hmm.
understand is that the number one security principle that's being breached every time data is taken or exfilled from an organization is possession. And that's the control that's being breached. A lot of people think, oh, it's confidentiality because they keep going back to that CIA triad. So they got the confidentiality, integrity, availability. But the other six controls of the nine is where all of our major gaps are in security programs and our tooling and in defense in depth that are completely forgotten about because people are looking at security with a perspective of three security controls where you really need to train not just your executive team and your IT team and your cyber team. Everybody needs to be trained on nine security principles. And there's several videos. If y'all just Google Jim West Nine Beyond CIA Triad, there's a Sisek did a podcast episode of it. I think I've went on a couple other people's podcasts talking about them as well. So you can find it easily, and the paper's out there on my one of my websites. So this information is free to go get. And I implore every cyber professional or anyone watching this video, because if you click to watch this video, you have some vested interest in what we're talking about. And I implore you, look up Beyond the CIA Triad. It's a paper that is going to enhance your perspective and deepen your awareness of what's at play when we talk about defense in depth. But yeah, that's definitely something every person out there in cyber or in any role that has to touch a computer should be aware of.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. Training is the cornerstone for capability development and how we build teams of enabled professionals. We must not only enable people, but we must also empower people as well too. With the knowledge, the skills, the tips, tools, techniques, the resources in order to go out there and really be of impact, not necessarily just of value, because value is really in the eye of the beholder, but impact, I truly, really believe is where it's at. How do we empower the future of cybersecurity professionals to continue to have an impact?
Well, I mean, I think, I had a conversation with May Brooks. In fact, she's been on our podcast twice. But May Brooks is a part of the IC Square chair. She's a board member. And so
Mhm.
during our discussions, we talked about how, when you're talking about empowering your professionals, there's a need to where, some people can get really technical and they're focused on, okay, this is what cyber says, this is what the policy or the regulation or the security control, this is the letter of the law. But what happens is they lose sight of what the business is trying to accomplish. And so sometimes from the cyber perspective, we think these executives and these managers and directors are just idiots because they're like, oh, why are you going to do it that way? You're not following the best use cases or the best practices to do it securely. You're trying to rush something to market. But see, I think this is where we need to have some convergence training where cyber folks
Mhm.
start training on the business operation side of the house of what the business, what their goals are, what their mission, what their objectives are, their targets for that year or that quarter. Have a little bit better understanding of that, and then at the same time, the executive team needs to have a little bit more training with the cyber folks. We need to have this convergence because that's where we can get on the same sheet of music. We always talk about it. Sounds good to say, let's get on the same sheet of music, but you got to purposely do that. You got to bring in sessions where the cyber folks can sit with the executives, not just when it's time to talk the incident handling or here's our coup plan. We're going to do a tabletop. That's not the time to do it. The time to do it is every week. have sessions where a director can sit with the CIO or the CSO to CISO or even just people from the security operations team. They can sit down and just have a session where they learn about what he has to do in a day in his job. Having that insight and perspective so you know that he's just not some idiot in that chair. He's actually business savvy. They have goals and things that objectives they need to hit, just like we're trying to help them do it securely. But we have to also, learn more about how they're operating and what they're trying to achieve and the timeframes they're working with so that we know what we could do and we can adjust our recommendations because I see a lot of professionals in cyber that they're recommending things by the book. And the thing is that when you talk about NIST, like RMF, it's a framework. ISO 27001, it's a framework. Frameworks are the structural things around a house. But what you put up on the walls, how you decorate it, the fence you put around it, the security system, all the third-party stuff you add into it can be customized. And just
Mhm.
like as in adding more money, adding more people to a thing, you can accelerate things. And if you need to save money, you can, elongate your timeline in a project. Same thing like with project management principles. These things can be negotiated, but it all starts with having an understanding where the cyber folks understand more about leadership's goals and objectives, and leadership understands more about what cybersecurity is trying to do in support of them. But we need that convergence, and I think that's a great opportunity for a lot of businesses out there to have what I would call a convergence type training that I don't see really widely available. I know a couple of training companies really focus on like phishing. They have certain things they focus on, but I'm not talking about the external threats in the company. I'm talking about the understanding of the leadership, which has to be tailored for each organization. It's not one size fits all. But literally, I would call it like kind of like take your cyber person to work day, where one of the people from the cyber team shadows an executive and sees what their day is like and actually gets an insight into what that role does and how it fits and impacts them in cyber. And then in turn, during that day, that cyber person can kind of be that advisor. That's great that you're working on this project. Actually, we had another project like that. And then they can start sharing the history, lessons learned. I think if we had more of that, that would also, bridge that convergence that I'm talking about, but also strengthen the relationships because that's how work gets done. Really, it's relationships, who you know, how much you trust them, and again, building that human element of networking in your organization is just as crucial as the regular network and infrastructure that you have.
Yeah, I love it. And there's definitely lots of opportunity on the way. And speaking of that, moving forward, I know here at Top Cyber Pro, we have been working on some tremendous things in the past, but where we're going within the future, I'm excited about it because I know, Jim, you and I, we've had some phenomenal conversations on how we're going to move forward with Top Cyber Pro. But what do we have in store for season three? Let's dive into that a little bit. What do we
Well,
have in
before
store
I
for
get to
season
season
three?
three, I'm going to share my screen real quick because I want to kind of show kind of where we've been at with the different episodes, right? And so, here we had the first one is Irfan here, right here that I mentioned right here, where we talked about open source intelligence and digital forensics. The guy's a level 99 digital forensics expert. So, powerful episode. I had James McQuiggan from Know Before. We talked dad jokes, and he actually got to meet Kevin Mitnick. So, anyone that knows who Kevin Mitnick is, he's kind of the godfather of security and one of the world's most famous hacker, right? And he unfortunately passed away, too soon. But James was fortunate enough to share a couple stories of the first time and I think the second time he met Kevin Mitnick. But great conversation about cybersecurity education. Going over to Dr. Nikki Robinson, the vulnerability management and the human factors of cybersecurity. Brilliant discussion. I mean, each one of these discussions was just brilliant. And just to kind of recap some really good ones, like I say, I interviewed Nick Shalon from Ask Sage AI, which recently got approved for DoD for their NIPRNet up to CUI. And now it exists on a .mil site. So when I was speaking to him, he was waiting for that accreditation, and then since then, which was just 2 months ago, he's already now on a .mil, and Ask Sage AI is doing great things for DoD. So that was a really great discussion with Nick. Some other good discussions I had with the two guys from Romania. I'm trying to remember their names. I think Edward and Matteo. We were talking. They just went to DEF CON in Vegas, and so at DEF CON they presented a major AWS vulnerability in public AMIs, and they had a little bit of funding to do this research, but they just did phenomenal research, developed a great presentation that was really eye-opening just to the huge vulnerability that so many businesses are not aware of that they have. And what was interesting is they basically took the equivalent of a teacup from the ocean of as far as their research. They took a teacup out of the AWS ocean and they found so many vulnerabilities in that teacup. The thought is if they were able to scan all of AWS globally, how much more would they have found? And it's just startling to think about that. But a great conversation there with the vulnerability in AWS. Some other great topics. I had, of course, Keith Wilson from Attack IQ. I can't say enough great things about Keith. Keith is just a phenomenal instructor. Attack IQ, for anyone watching this, it's free training, free Credly digital badges, and of course, you could share it once you complete it to your LinkedIn profile automatically. It'll update your LinkedIn just by 2 clicks. Phenomenal training. I can't speak enough about it. It's a focus on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And then I guess the last one I want to kind of call out is I did have Ryan Patterson from Unplugged's Up Phone. We got to talk a lot about security as far as privacy for the individual. And so that was another good conversation. But again, all of these podcast episodes are just insights, their perspectives, insights, knowledge. And these folks are just presenting this, they're not being paid or compensated for it. They're giving this to the industry to give their insight and perspective out of their own time. And I thank all of them. I mean, there's a couple more folks on here, but I don't want to, just go down to each episode one by one. But they're all the episodes are great. And I implore anyone watching to this point, please check some of them out. Definitely start with Irfan and work your way through them. There's so much great content there. So I'll stop to share there.
Awesome. Jim, thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to share moving forward, especially for season three or
Okay.
anything else that's
Yeah,
coming
season
forward?
three, we're going to be starting off with a triple panel discussion. Episode one, which will come out either the last week of the year or first week of January. More likely it'll be the first week of January. But I have Dr. Spina from MITRE, and I have the two founders, Sean, and I'm sorry I forget the second name, but
Mhm.
I have the two guys that founded the Cloud Security Alliance, CSA. And we're going to be talking about the Caveat tool, which is MITRE's free tool in validating and looking over security controls that are focused on your cloud components of your organization, which again, people have heard about the MITRE attack framework, but they haven't maybe heard about all of the other tools and components that have been built after MITRE attack to kind of hone in on like AI or cloud and so on and so forth. So that's going to be episode one right out the gate. And then I have another couple great speakers lined up. What I've really enjoyed is that, when I do reach out to these, what I would call level 99, top of their field experts, is their willingness to find the time to do these podcasts. Because again, they're not being compensated. Simply, hey, would you be willing to share an hour to discuss these topics that you're an expert in? Would you be willing to share your personal story of how you got started in IT cyber? And if anything that I look back on this season that I really, really, really enjoyed was those stories. That's my most favorite question of every podcast is if we could go back in time to the first day that you decided, hey, I want to do this IT cyber thing for my career. What is that story like? And some people they were doing it out the gate in college or already knew they wanted to be in doing something with computers, and that's fine. We got some folks that are like that. But the stories I really loved were the ones where, hey, I was just working in marketing and I had no IT experience, but then one day this situation happened and they said, hey, if you can fix it, fix it. And they studied, read up on it, fixed the thing, and next thing you know, they're like, okay, you're our IT person now. I love hearing these stories where they were on another career path and then something, whether work or life happened, and they just got right into cyber, just like that. As I said earlier, there's so many easy ways to get started in the cyber. And if I had to say one major message that out of every podcast, when we talked education and training, and the opportunities in cyber is just get started. If I had to put it down to
Mhm.
2 words, get started. And it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be, you don't have to sign up on Top Cyber Pro. As the founder and CEO, I'm not telling you to sign up with my business. I'm telling you, start with reading NIST documents, SP 800 documents. Start with, YouTube University. Go try Hack Me if you want to try pen testing. Just Google how to start my cybersecurity career. You're going to find 100 and plus stories, blogs, websites that are all offering packages. But what I would tell people is don't spend your money yet. Do all of the free training. There is 1,001 sites with free training, free resources. Take all the free training first because that's when you're going to kind of get the idea of, okay, which direction am I really trying to go in? Do the free stuff first because free is free. Everybody can
Mhm.
appreciate free, and it just costs your investment of your time. Then when you start honing in on, okay, I really like this aspect, I really like these things, then that's when you can do things like research whoever you're about to give your hard-earned money to. Research them. Do a search, look on Reddit subreddits of what people are talking about. They will recommend, even if you're studying for a certification, they will tell you this YouTube channel, this website, this guy's training product. Reddit's another great source to kind of vetting things that other people have already been there, done that. So you don't have to feel like you're alone in your cybersecurity journey. You can go down well-trodden roads that are already been walked down so that you don't have to cut through the bushes and the brush trying to figure out your own path. You use the internet for what it's for. In fact, I would even say go to an AI like a generative AI like ChatGPT and say, how can I get started in cybersecurity? And tell me step by step, and it'll list out, hey, start here, start here, start here. So again, a million ways to get into cybersecurity and with a million jobs looking for you.
Yeah, I love it. And you know what? Those opportunities are turning into more and more possibilities every single day as the cyber threat increases, so is the demand for cybersecurity professionals just like you. Jim, any final thoughts? I know you just kind of unpacked a whole lot of things right there, but I just want to give, an opportunity if you have another golden nugget or any final thoughts before we close the show here
I'll
today.
just repeat what I just said. If you're watching this, get started. Just follow a website, sign up, subscribe to a YouTube channel, read some articles. Again, do within a couple of internet searches and reading, a couple materials here and there. Just get started. Getting started, taking the first step towards a career in cybersecurity is the hardest thing to do because once you start stepping in that direction, it gets easier and easier because then you'll start making connections. You'll start growing your LinkedIn network and your social network. And then you'll start going down the path of gaining the certification so that you can get a good, solid paying job that will eventually go from, one of the last few people I mentored went from being a male nurse, making a barely, I think, 30,000 a year. Within, let's say, a year and a half, he was making 60 something, almost 70,000 a year in a year and a half of study and work. And so he more than doubled his salary. And now the last update I have from him, I think he's almost at $80,000 within just 6 months of working that first job. He's now a lead of his team because again, it's not always about a degree or a bunch of acronyms behind your name. It's also your capability because once you get that interview, once you get the job offer, then it's about how are you going to perform. Terry also mentioned the key word earlier, the impact you bring to an organization. This guy made an impact, and the company rewarded him for it. And like I said, now he's the lead of his team, making over 80,000 a year. He's now has a secret clearance, so I'm hoping that within the next year, he's probably in overseas in Europe or Middle East or Asia, making 100,000 plus. And again, we're talking less than 2 years of an investment of his time, which is what most people would spend trying to pursue a degree. This guy did not get a degree. He got a couple certifications. He got that first job. He got a clearance upgrade, and now his capacity to earn six figures plus is there for the rest of his life. And again, isn't that worth 6 months to 24 months of your time?
Absolutely. Jim, I love it. Great time talking with you here today. Man, it's always a pleasure to be able to connect and reconnect with you. And, as we share all of our, vast knowledge from in cybersecurity, man, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. If you want more tips, tools, techniques, and resources, then head on over to our site, topcyberpro.com, along with getting connected with us on all of our social media platforms. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next episode.